Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the next installment of our Digital Dash mini training sessions. We will go ahead and get started right away. Today's mini session, as we've discussed in our last session, there's been several updates to how Optimize measures the accessibility of tables since we started the Digital Dash. The check plan for today is all data table summaries describe navigation and structure of the table. That check is still present in the Optimize system, but as we discussed in our last session, the summary element really should no longer be used for tables. But if it is, we do need to make sure it is used correctly. So today we are going to pick up where we left off last time with our tables, captions, summaries, oh my, and this is part 2 of that. Today we're going to focus on how a summary should be used if it is present and how to make sure that it's accessible. So with that, just a reminder, please post any questions you have in the Google chat, and we will make sure after the session that we get answers to everyone's questions, and we'll also post them in our digital accessibility chat space. We're also going to be recording our training session today, and we'll post it to our YouTube page later this afternoon. So with that, let's get started on part 2. But before we do, a quick recap of what we discussed last time. The accessibility guidelines have not changed over the years. What has changed is the way we build out websites. So we now separate out the presentation layer, or how we define how something looks, from the content layer, meaning the structure, the content on the page, the information we're trying to communicate. And we keep both of those things separate. In the past, we would use tables for either conveying information or to control the layout of the page. But as the web has evolved, we now use HTML elements to convey meaning, and we use cascading style sheets to control the style. For the most part now, we avoid using tables solely for layout. For data tables, we don't typically use the summary element anymore. That's now been deprecated, and instead we use the caption element. Now, last time we talked about how the check all data table summaries contain text has been removed during the March-April Optimize update. Several agencies, though, still have that showing up. We did have a conversation with Optimize about that, and they have paused that rollout to make sure that all of the previous review/ignored decisions that you might have made on your website are still captured, and so you don't lose that information. So if you are still seeing the data table summaries contain text check, that's because they've currently paused the review. Eventually that check is going to be removed and won't be reflected in your score. But if you'd like more information on that check and kind of the background on tables and captions and summaries, please watch last week's session. Very fast review. Today, we're going to focus on data tables and summaries. This is what we mean when we talk about a data table. A table where the structure and relationships actually communicate some meaning. The chart or table that we see before us, if I were to move Willie Adams' name into the third column, he would no longer be a person. Willie would now be a type of coffee. So by moving that information into different columns, it actually changes the meaning. So that's one indication that it's a data table. The other two important elements from an accessibility standpoint is data tables must always contain both a header row or header column sometimes, and a caption down at the bottom. So anytime we are trying to use a table to communicate information and that structure, we need to make sure we're using a caption and a header row or header columns. The other important element there is the difference between a caption element versus the summary attribute. Captions are the markup that we should be using to describe data tables. They kind of function like they're the alternate text for the table. They help provide context for the table, make it easier to understand. And most importantly, the caption element is visible to sighted users, and it's understood by assistive technology, meaning all users of your website will get the information from a caption element. The summary attribute, though, is slightly different. This one is an older HTML attribute. It really should no longer be used. The intent behind it initially was to provide that alternate text, but the summary element isn't visible to sighted users. It's only visible, or I should say only understood, by assistive technologies. So if used, and again, while the summary element is deprecated, it still can be used, but if it is used, it should not duplicate the information that is in a caption. So let's dive in real quick to the checks that we're talking about today. And again, today we're really going to focus just on that summary attribute when it's used with a data table. We're not going to cover layout tables again and really captions again. There are two checks in the optimized system that relate to the use of the summary attribute. The one we're primarily focused about, the data tables summaries describe the navigation and structure of the table. And the second one, if you are using summaries, because these are data tables, you do have to still have a caption. But if you are using both summaries and captions, the summary should not simply duplicate what is in the caption. And I want to do a quick programming note on the word deprecated, because in the world of IT, we use that term a lot, but it may be unfamiliar to folks. So what deprecated means is that it's still there. It will still work in most browsers if it's used, but there's no guarantee in the future it's going to continue to work. This is an older item that for backwards compatibility, most browsers still support it, but sometime in the future, browsers are going to stop using it. So if you don't have summaries on your tables today, that's great. You don't need to add them. If it is a data table, you do need to make sure that a caption element is used. The other item is, if the summary attribute is there, that doesn't mean it's an accessibility problem. The summary attribute, as I said, most browsers are still going to support it. It's not an accessibility problem if it does exist, but we do have to use them in the right way to make sure that that we're not causing a problem. So if you don't see either of these two checks that we're covering today in your optimized system, that's great. You don't have to worry about them. It simply means you don't have summaries within any of your tables. But if you are seeing these two checks, that means the optimized tool identified the summary attribute as being used. And so we want to make sure that we're going to write a correct summary. So we often think about accessibility problems as only impacting people with disabilities, but a web page can be inaccessible even to those without disabilities. And this is a good example. Sighted users, because the summary attribute is not visible to sighted users, those users aren't going to know what information is there. And if you put important information somewhere inside the summary, but it's nowhere else on the page, you've now made that information inaccessible to your sighted users. Conversely, if users who are using assistive technology, when they read that summary element, if it's poorly written, you're going to end up confusing them. If you simply duplicate the caption, the screen readers are going to read the caption and then read the summary, and they'll be repeating that same information. And of course, if you put wrong information in the summary, you're going to make it very difficult for users of assistive technology to be able to navigate through the table and find what they're looking for. So let's take a look within the optimized tool. And I'm going to use the ASET website today as an example. The first thing we do, of course, is go to our accessibility module, jump down to our checklist, and we find, or I did a search for data table. And then we'll find this review item check that all data table summaries must describe the navigation and structure of the table. So on this site, we actually only have one page that has it there. And that's going to be typical because on most of our agency platform websites, The data table summary is only there because the table was copy and pasted in from something like Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. We don't have the tools to make it easy for you to create the summary element on our websites. So I'll click into this page and open up the page details. This is a check that, while you can use the browser extension and visit the page directly to see if it's correct, you can also typically do it directly from within the Optimize tool. And so now it opens up this direct check here. And in this case, you'll see there's the table element that starts off, and then right after it, we see the word summary. And this is a table of engagement managers assigned to each board, agency, or commission. Now let's switch over, and I want to make sure I'm sharing the right tab each time. And you'll see I already have the Optimize extension loaded up. I clicked on my content issues, filtered down to this particular topic, and it's the same information listed over here. But this is the page, and here is the table that has this review item. Again, because this is a summary, the Optimize system doesn't know if this is actually describing the navigation and structure of the table. And here's our data table. We have our data header up at the top here. It's simply a list of the agency IDs in the first column, and the second column, the agency name, and the third column, the engagement manager. In this particular case, so we do have a summary attached to it, but this summary doesn't really describe the navigation and structure of the table. So your assisted users would know what the table is about, but they wouldn't necessarily know how to navigate through the table. So a better summary for this table would be this opening sentence, but then also describing the fact that the ID is in column 1, agency name, engagement manager is in column 3. So we're going to quickly click our edit button and dive into, and I'll show you for folks that are on our agency platform service. If I scroll down to the table, on most things we say, okay, right click on the table, then we'll select table properties, and you'll see there is no caption for this table. So that's a second error that we need to fix. But you'll see there is no summary option for me to edit here. And again, that's because the summary was added in by a different program and pasted in here. So to change the summary, I'm going to have to go to the source, and then I'll scroll down, and this, I understand, for some folks is going to be hard to read, but I'm just looking for that summary. And I'm going to take away this text, and instead I'm going to type in the table of engagement managers. I should have had this typed ahead of time, sorry. List out the agency ID in column 1. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it's a little bit longer. I'll do that after the session, but I would describe out the entire navigation there because I took out that high level description. I'm also going to add that into the caption here. And I'm going to just save this so I don't lose that for now. But let's assume I went through there, did everything, got all that text perfectly clean and accurate. I could then either go through, well, two things. I could wait for the next review check to come along, and it would still be there because even though I've changed that element, the system doesn't know whether what I wrote was accurate or not. So I would still need to come back here and click on reviewed. If I wanted to get credit for doing the fix right away, I could click mark as fixed. But of course, after the next scan, since this is a review item, that scan's going to come right back and reappear. So the way to check all of these are all very simple. It's identified, make sure that the summary attribute doesn't duplicate the caption element, make sure it doesn't contain any kind of garbage text, that it actually describes the navigation of the table. And after reading the summary, ask yourself, would you know how the to navigate the table? Would you know without seeing it what the table looks like? And if so, then mark that check as reviewed. And there's the two different checks that you're able to mark as reviewed. So I hope I made all of this clear. If you did miss last week, I posted all of these resources in the Google chat. Part 1, we talk about tables, captions, and summaries at a higher level. We've also got a couple of really good resources on better understanding tables. And lastly, I didn't share this last week, but it's a fantastic resource put on by Arizona State University. There's an entire section on creating accessible table guidelines. And so we strongly recommend you take a look at that. With that, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I will hang back for a few minutes. So if you have any questions over what we covered, please post them in the Google chat and we will share them later this afternoon when we have today's recording finished. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.